Hello everyone and welcome to this Total Education lecture. We'd like to remind you that these lectures are brought to you for free, so if you'd like to help us out, give us a like down below. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the space below. And of course, don't forget to visit our website, totaleducationcentre.com.au. At the website you'll find teacher resources if you're a teacher, and of course there are student notes that go along with these lectures that will help and assist you in any examination situation. So don't forget, visit the website totaleducationcentre.com.au. Hello and welcome to another Total Education lecture. This afternoon I'd like to talk to you about Robert Frost's poem After Apple Picking. And I think After Apple Picking is one of Frost's most contentious poems, and certainly the one talked about most in terms of what it really means. Of course, on a literal level, it's very, very clear what it is. It's just a man picking apples and going through sort of the relationship of the job to his life. But there are some critics, such as Costello, who have seen a little bit more in the poem, and I'd like to read you just to start us off in terms of thinking about what we discover when we look at the poem, in terms of how other people perceive it, and developing your own opinions, which are very important in this unit of work, in this module, what other people think. Now he says this: by placing people and nature side by side, Frost often appears to write the kind of romantic poetry associated with England and the United States in the 1800s. There is, however, a crucial difference between his themes and those of the older tradition. The romantic poets of the 1800s believed that people could live in harmony with nature. To Frost, the purposes of people and nature are never the same, and so nature's meanings can never be known. Probing for nature's secrets is futile and foolish. Humanity's best chance for serenity does not come from understanding the natural environment. Serenity comes from working usefully and productively amid the external forces of nature. Frost often used this theme of significant toil by which people are nourished and sustained. This theme appears in famous poems such as After Apple Picking and Mending Wall. And I've already given you a lecture and I've talked about Mending Wall previously, and we see the two men fixing the fence. In this poem, it's Frost picking apples. The nature of his toil is apple picking. And he says very clearly in the poem that he's tired and his toil is over. If we look at the first few lines of the poem, he says, my long two-pointed ladder's sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough. But I am done with apple picking now. And the next line begins to talk about the essence of winter and how he's coming to the end of his life and the end of his existence. And of course, it's a poem with the idea of the apple. You know, many people have talked about the ladder pointing to heaven and the apple representing the original sin and all those types of ideas. And Frost truly is talking about perhaps his own life here, because he was significantly a farmer poet himself. I've talked about the literal level where he's just tired of picking apples after a long day's work, and he's moved through all those physical chores, and now he's moving into a more dreamlike state where he begins to discuss the philosophical aspects of life very clearly. He's tired and he feels sleep coming on all through the poem as he begins, after that section I read, to talk about winter and the ice forming and things, and in the end he thinks about sleep and permanent sleep and about death and those sorts of things. So that's the literal level. And that's basically what the poem's about. But it's certainly more than that. It's also about an examination of his life journey. And many critics have suggested that the apples represent Frost's poems. I mean, and that's certainly one interpretation you can have. And each of those poems, he's certainly got unfinished poems, and some of the poems weren't so good. And the apples represent that sort of creativity in his life. But it's not just about apples, and we know that from the word heaven still in that clear aspect. And he seems to think that any reading and interpretation of those ideas and issues is important. Another reading or interpretation here is that Frost may be thinking about his life as a poet, as I've said, and thinking about his death. And certainly he's trying to leave some legacy, and Frost conveys this through 4 main symbols, and the legacy of his life would be those 4 main symbols: the apples, which are representative of his work; the apple picker himself; the seasons or year that represents life; and the bin heap, which represents the successes and failures of life. So you can look at those 4 aspects very clearly and move through those. And he gives us, of course, the metaphors of the ladder and the harvest to convey each of those ideas very clearly. And the repetition of the word sleep, of course, at the end gets us focused on that central idea, and that would be the end of what he's done. And the lack of complexity of language isn't necessarily means the poem simplistic. It just makes the poem very accessible. So really, what can we learn in terms of discovery? And I'd like to talk about, certainly, I know most of you will be more interested in discovery than anything else for this module. It's a metaphysical journey of discovery. It's not necessarily that literal physical journey, although that is part of the poem itself. The two-pointed ladder, talking about heaven, he says, I'm done with apple picking now. And then he takes us on a journey of discovery, his own discovery of his own life. And we can certainly join him on that discovery and learn things about ourselves and think about life in general and the way we're motivated by life. I've given you the different critical interpretations, but you need to make sure you've adapted it and thought about it on your own. The poem again, as in Mending Wall and all of Frost's poem, uses the senses to engage the reader in these discoveries and gives the more metaphysical aspects a solid base that we can cling on to. He's overtired. He talks about the pressure of the ladder round, the scent of the apples, all those sorts of things very clearly. And the persona takes us on that very personal journey through to his sleep and dreaming. After apple picking, again, like Mending Wall, is ambiguous in shows that this persona has some regrets, but has also achieved much, and he's looking forward to that long and restful period that he has. It speaks to us as a poem about ordinary life, but made extraordinary through how he sees the world and how he views the world. And that goes back to linking with Mending Wall, where the other farmer sees it traditionally and Frost sees it in a very different way. And he's talking here about how we perceive life and the effect of nature on that perception of life. This is the quality that makes Frost unique. And he certainly clearly finishes the poem with the words, and he talks about the woodchuck, and he says, long sleep as I describe is coming on, or just some human sleep. So there's those double aspects in the poem, that literal sense and that metaphysical sense. I hope that's given you some ideas to think about and clarified some of the issues in After Apple Picking. I certainly suggest you go back and read it. Many of the ideas I've suggested, of course, are in the notes, and I've developed these ideas fully and thoroughly in the notes you can find on the website. Have a think about After Apple Picking. I think it's well worth writing about, and certainly it's a good poem that you can get plenty of analysis from. I'm Bruce Pattinson from Total Education Centre. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. Don't forget, if this has given you some help, press on the like button down there, or visit our website at totaleducationcentre.com.au. Thank you.